Hey there, this is Kellen. Welcome to another magnificent episode of Results with Kellen. I'm really excited about our guest today. And before we get started, for those of you that are new to Results with Kellen, let me tell you just a little bit about myself. I've spent my life helping other people maximize their gifts and talents. Sometimes it's been in the corporate setting where I led organizations in the United States and in Canada to extraordinary accomplishments. And sometimes it's been in volunteer work in church and music and things. But getting the most out of people and helping them maximize their gifts and talents has been a passion of mine from the time I was very young. And so that's the thing that has driven me right now to create this telesummit for you, Results with Kellen, and bring to you some of the best speakers on different topics, but all aimed at one thing, all aimed at helping you get maximum results in your life. And hopefully this will be another one of a series of these powerful interviews. And I'm really excited about today's because the rise of social media has been such a prominent factor in our lives. So now before we get started, there's a couple things I want to make sure you're doing so that you get the most out of today's interview. To get the full benefit, please go to Julio Viskovich's page. Now, that's our guest today, Julio Viskovich. Type this link into your browser bar right now, www.resultswithkellen.com/Julio, Julio. You'll know you're on the right page when you see the picture of our guest, Julio Viskovich. Now, there's lots of things you can do on this page, but what I want you to do is I want you to scroll down to the bottom because that's where you can leave comments. And while the interview is going on, it's very likely that you're going to have some comments, some questions, some thoughts that occur to you. So take advantage of that space and write them down. The second thing I want you to know is that Julio is going to give you a free gift today just for listening to this interview. We'll talk about that later as the interview goes on, but I want you to know that that's coming. So Julio Viskovich, our guest today, is an incredible guy. He's won awards and he has had a diversity of experience. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He's one of the world's premier social selling trainers, delivering custom education on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Google+, Hootsuite, and other essential sales tools and activities. To date, he's trained over 10,000. That's a big number, 10,000 sales and marketing professionals in person and 4 million in on-demand learning online. He's in the Forbes. He's been recognized by Forbes as one of the top 30 social sales influencers in the world for 2014, and by Lead Management Association's in 50 Most Influential of 2013, named as one of the top 25 most influential inside sales pros of 2013 as well. Julio has first authored his first book with an interesting name called Sellarketing and became an adjunct professor at British Columbia, two of their prestigious universities. So that's quite an impressive list for our guests today. Julio, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Kellen, and always overwhelmed by such a great intro. Happy to be aboard.
Well, thank you. So, Julio, first of all, people may or may not know you well at all, and so what I'd like you to do for our listeners is give a little history. How did you get where you are, and what drew you into this place and this place where you've been able to have such an impact?
It's been quite a journey for me, Kellen, I'll tell you that. It started going back about 10 years ago, and actually I was a teacher at that time, and kind of finding my way in the world, seeing what I like to fit into, and eventually I really started to love this marketing thing, right? And in 2008, it really started to take hold with social media. Back then it was called Web 2.0, Facebook came out, Twitter came out, LinkedIn came out, and all of a sudden the social media was born. So at that time, and it was an amazing time period for me, was I started to really dive into it and start to see that we could use social media not just as a way to tell people how many pepperonis were on your pizza, but as a way to actually dive in and drive revenue and make a sales process much more effective. So fast forward to 2011 is when I joined a social media management company called Hootsuite. And at that time, I was their global sales trainer. So that means that I oversaw the sales team as far as development and training, and I rolled out various programs. And one of the things that I quickly realized during my time at Hootsuite was Social media enhances the sales process. It makes your sales cycle quicker. It makes revenue grow. It makes quota attainment much, much easier. And ultimately just drives more success with your communications. So that's kind of where I went to and how I came to where I am today. And fast forward to now, it's 2014, I've developed my own training methodology and sales training company to help some of the bigger brands and medium-sized companies in the world adopt social media and layer it over their sales process.
Well, that's a great intro, and thank you for that. It emphasized a couple of things. You know, when you said you were kind of finding your way in the world and figuring out what you wanted to do, it reminded me of some of the big questions that we tend to ask ourselves, and stuff like, you know, is it really possible for me to get what I want out of life, or how come it seems so hard to manifest the circumstances I really want and to create the vision that I have, or is it even really possible to create the life I want? And so often that ties to money and our ability to produce value, and sales is always a key piece of that, no matter what our job is. And so this is a perfect time, because I've had people even ask me questions like, is there some kind of secret formula that some people have that I don't? And so this is going to be a really timely topic and timely interview, because social media has not only exploded across the world with billions involved, but has practically taken over the marketing and sales processes in many aspects. So let's start with a question that I've got for you, and that is, you use the word social selling, and that's kind of a new description. What I'd like you to do first is just tell me what that means, and why is it so important to understand it?
Great question. And I really hope that in the next 2 years, there's no such thing as a definition of social selling, because what I really hope is it really just becomes selling. But unfortunately, right now, that's not the case, and we still have to refer to it as a different term. So social selling to me means using social networks and social data that you can get from being on Twitter, being on LinkedIn, to enhance your current sales process, and ultimately leading to, again, quicker sales cycles, more quota attainment, and driving more revenue. So in a nutshell, that's my definition of social selling. And why is it so important, which was the second part of your question, is, well, I'm going to refer to a study by Edelman's Digital, and what they do is something called the Trust Barometer. And they reach out to people, consumers, and they ask, where are you finding your trust? Where do you look to find information before purchasing a product? So interestingly enough, 3-4 years ago, people said that I would go online, I would go on the website, I would read magazines, I would look at marketing materials, and that's how I would decide if I wanted to buy a product. Well, the problem with that was there was a lack of trust put in companies in marketing materials, and we've seen a huge flip. Now people are trusting third-party folks who have no affiliation to the company or to the marketing department. So now more than ever, it's so important to actually have your salespeople active on social media, active touching people online, and active leaving information online for others to follow. What we're seeing is a rise of Yelp, Google Places, Facebook reviews. People are looking to third parties for their information to form a buying or purchase decision. And if you're not online leaving those trails of information for people to follow and connecting with them online, it's a huge miss.
Well, that's a fantastic answer, and leads me right into the next one. And so this is a little bit about your journey still. Why is this, and it was interesting that you said that you didn't want there to be a definition of social selling separate, you just want that to be part of the process. So why is the notion of this social selling important to you personally, and the businesses that you're trying to help? I mean, the world of today with respect to marketing and sales didn't even exist 10 years ago, as you pointed out in the beginning. And so I want you to tell me why it's so important to you and your process, and what are those major changes that brought us where we are today, especially, and what do they mean for established businesses? I know that's too many parts maybe, but see what you can do with it.
Sure. Well, first of all, I mean, I've asked many people, would you have your son or daughter enter the sales industry? Why or why not? And each and every time I get a very, very similar response. And that response is usually absolutely not. They think of car salesmen. They think of going perhaps to a store like Future Shop that's very much commission driven. And people are trying to sell you what makes most sense for them. So a lot of the honor and ethical pieces that I feel should be a part of the sales industry and should be built into every successful salesperson was actually not present. So I thought there's got to be a way in this crazy world where people have been lied to. They've been victims of salespeople getting, commission and quota based on, selling them something that wasn't necessarily the right fit or product for them. So why social selling is so important to me is because it puts honor back in the sales process and starts to move people from your traditional definition of a salesperson into a trusted advisor, more of a consultant. Because as you mentioned earlier on, people are finding information all over the place. They're coming to salespeople with the sales process anywhere from 60 to 90% complete. They found this information online, and they no longer put such an emphasis on touching base with a salesperson to learn about the product. They're now concerned about getting a consultant as a salesperson, someone who can add value to them and someone who can make them look good and drive success. And that's the way we need to start being as salespeople. So for any big company who's looking at continuing to drive revenues and continuing to succeed, they need to have their sales team on this. They need to have their guys turning in from B players to A players. So in order to have a peak performance sales team, you have got to adopt social selling in this day and age.
It's just a fantastic point, and your personal concern about there being ethical behavior and matching the product to the person's real need and so forth is so key. And you mentioned a key demographic. We used to get everything we knew about a product from a salesman, and when it didn't do exactly a certain thing, we'd think in our mind or say out loud, well, the guy said or the gal said, right? And that whole thing is, you're saying we're looking everywhere else, and we've already figured out we want something, and we come for the last bit of info or the last bit of reassurance that will handle it, or a demo, show me something about it, and as opposed to simply being cold when we come in and then having somebody warm us up and do the whole process. That's a really important change to the process. How do you help create that change? Because as you mentioned, there are still many stores that are commission driven, and they do that for profit. They don't want to have people around on their sales floor that aren't producing, so they make it either heavily commission or all commission. But at the same time, you're saying that they need to change that and make it so that there is this ethical behavior and they actually have the interest of customers at heart. So when you start to work with a company, what do you do to get them to understand that there has to be a different starting point, I guess?
Well, it's certainly not difficult when you start to look at the lifetime customer values of folks who have gone through the different pipelines, where someone was extremely happy with their product, they got exactly what they needed, they had the professional services behind it, and ultimately drove success. Whereas there's a whole other side of the business, and I think every sales manager or operations leader can look at some of these deals on the back end in their CRM system and see what happened. But oftentimes there's people who definitely leave early, cancel their contract, end up jumping ship at the end of their annual term. And where you're seeing as people who have been ethical, who have given the right product to the individual, you're seeing the lifetime customer value skyrocket. And these are the people who are signing multi-year deals. And ultimately it's better for the business. So again, it's that battle that's currently existed on getting money in the door now versus long-term success. And it's showing people that if you intend on being a company that's not just here now, but is going to be here in 3, 5, 10 years, and it's going to have an amazing customer base, you have got to start looking at taking this to the next level, actually building trust and building long-term relationships. So looking at that is probably the first way I like to kind of enlighten people on what's happening in the space. And going beyond that, the numbers just don't lie. I mean, even if people are very much focused on their quota or driving maximum revenue right now, it still shows that as a social seller, they're outperforming their peers by about 75%. So even if you are looking to get money in the door now, it's still a better way is through adopting social selling. For example, understanding and listening on the social ecosystem for buying signals and that people are ready to buy. This doesn't mean you have to sell them a product that's not geared to them, but by understanding and identifying a prospect that you had no idea existed by leveraging social media and being able to sell to them when they're ready to now get your product or service. I mean, that's real sales. That's real power in the salesperson's hands. And regardless of getting dollars in now or later, it's going to help in both scenarios. So I think that adopting social selling is just something that needs to be done, and it's very easy sell these days because the numbers are showing exactly what I'm preaching.
You know, that's interesting. You used a key word that I talk about a lot with clients as well when I talk about marketing, and I do some different kinds of things, but you use the word listening, and you use it in an interesting way. Listening when a prospect's standing in front of you, and instead of talking is, of course, a key important way to figure out where they are, but you used it in terms of listening to the social signals that people are putting out on their Facebook and in their lives and about their journey, and using that listening, social listening. I'm inventing a new thing here, but the social listening, or extrapolating what you're doing, listening to the social signals to see when they're ready. So you say it's an easy sell, and I'm inclined to agree with you given the explanation and the numbers, and that the numbers don't lie for established businesses, that you can look at a track record, and you talked about, you know, end of a year versus multi-year contracts and those kinds of things. Let's shift gears for just a second and talk about new businesses, because you know, there's a demographic that says that 20 years ago there were 2% entrepreneurs, and by either 17 or 2020, depending on which study you read, that 40% of the people in North America or the U.S. are going to be self-employed. So that's a 20-fold increase in 20 years. That means another bazillion people starting businesses. So what advice would you give in your process for someone that is just starting or thinking of starting a business, in terms of applying this from the get-go to, quote, sort of do it right out of the gate? So I'm not sure if Julio heard my question. Julio, did you hear that question? So he postulated a couple of really interesting things. He may be having a little technical glitch, and I'm sure that he knows how to refresh that. So we'll connect back in just a second. But I want to stress something that really impressed me in that last answer, and that is the numbers not lying. I mean, even in the twist, the rub has always been, get some money now when you're a commission-based salesman and make your quota this month or this quarter, versus long-term value, meaning a repeat customer that comes over and over again. And in my mind, that's always been the twist, or the rub, the conflict, I guess, as it were. But it was an interesting point that he made, that even in the current quarter kinds of quotas and selling in that way, that it's really important and more effective to do the kind of social selling that he talks about. And I was actually surprised that that 75% number popped out, that said even in current sales quotas, that 75% improvement or betterment when you adopt the social selling strategies, which means more listening, more connectedness to what the customer actually needs, and being aware of the social signals which there are there, and you can read, like learn to read in terms of the process that he teaches, and be aware of those social signals so that you can be aware of when a customer needs what you have and approach them at the very time that they're ready. So I was really surprised that at the moment of need, you can actually tell when a customer's ready, and that even in terms of current sales, there isn't really a conflict anymore. That conflict, I imagine, between start slow and do it, for the long term, versus get it now, that it's get it now and get it later. So anyway, that's an amazing point that I hadn't been aware of, and I'm really excited about. One of the things that I notice with my own participation in the social media is that it has, in my own business, been an amazing tool to get clients as well. And so that was one of the reasons I was so excited about having Julio here with us today is because the social exposure that I have created in my business through the very tools that he talked about, Facebook, LinkedIn, Hangouts, Google, and so forth, were really tools, current sale, really good tools for using in terms of my own process. So I'm certainly a devotee of these processes and have learned to use them. Julio, I'm glad you made it back. One of these technical glitches always happens. So let's.
You gotta love technology.
Yeah, you gotta love technology. So anyway, I was just asking you a question, and I got all the way through asking it and realized I'd ask myself. So let me do you one more time, and that's this. You know, I referred to established businesses, and that's what you were talking about, businesses that were ongoing already. And I was wondering, in terms of the demographic that says there's a 20-fold increase in entrepreneurs between 20 years ago and 2020, and 40% of people are going to be self-employed. So what advice would you give new businesses or people that are just getting ready to start, because that's going to jump up by zillions, to do it right out of the gate?
Oh, I mean, it's a full-scale change in how the thought process has to kind of build itself out, right? I mean, it's changing the idea that previously you should be doing cold calls, you should be sending template emails. If you want to do social selling right from the beginning, it really means adopting it from the ground up. It means providing the right training. It means doing things like looking at who your customer base is and then doing a buyer persona map, which you can map those buyers back and understanding what social networks they're on. Once you do that, you know which social networks you as an entrepreneur or you as your sales team needs to be on. Once you've developed that system and strategy and determined where you need to be, the next step is actually just going out there and listening. I know we just discussed listening, but that's the most important part, is going out, finding those social networks that your buyers are on, and understanding the lingo, understanding what's being said, what are the key topics, and only then can you actually enter in the conversation. It's no longer about me. If you look at how businesses and entrepreneurs and large corporations are marketing themselves, it's through consistent content marketing that are about them, about how amazing they are, and that's not what people are looking for these days. They're looking to connect on a human-to-human level. So as an entrepreneur seeking to build business out, or as a sales team seeking to build business out, utilize the myriads of social data that are online and still do the same things you were doing before, but do them better. And what I mean by that is if you're going to make a phone call or send an email to someone, it's not the best approach anymore to just grab a templated email or a script and start calling or emailing someone. Just take the extra 30 seconds to 2 minutes to go online and find a piece of context about that person. Do they like the Green Bay Packers? Do they like knitting on the weekend? Are they a dog person? All these little pieces of information that are so readily available online are the pieces that you can take and work into your email subject line, your emails, your calls, and build rapport at a level that's never been seen before. And this is how you can differentiate yourself and stand out from all the other people who are now entering the space, like you mentioned. And that's how you're going to stand a leg above and make sure that you are being successful when others might not be adopting this approach so readily.
So you used another cool keyword. You said rapport, and you also said that person-to-person contact. And isn't it so interesting that we're just tired of being talked at? I mean, I know when I go online, I get so tired of seeing ad that pretends they know who I am and pretends that they know something about me when I know they don't. And there's nothing in that particular thing that indicates that anyone has looked at me at all, and we're so tired of that. We have banner blindness. We don't look at certain parts of the page anymore. Certain ads. We just ignore that. I know I do, and when I talk to clients and prospects, I know they do too. And what you're saying is just take a minute to get to know them a little bit, so they feel at least like the edge is off, like you're not just there for something. You know my team, you know my name, you know something, my dog, my cat, my grandma just died, whatever, in a way that lets them feel a little bit more personally connected. Mm-hmm. And that is such a differentiator, is what I'm hearing you say, and it certainly agrees with my own experience. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you another question. So I see, I'm going to completely change gears for a sec. You're a professor at a couple of universities, and that means you talk to a lot of younger people. So I had a question when I thought about this. There's you mentioned a couple of times that there's this enormous change I know that has happened with the advent of social media and the way that we want to be treated and, as customers and everything else. So I'm wondering if you could talk for a minute about, I know there's lots of older people that go back to school. I mean, I take classes and everything else, but by and large, when I walk through a university campus, the majority are certainly of a younger demographic. So I'm wondering, in teaching this, is there a different receptivity and a different mindset between the younger and the older group in terms of what you have to say or what you have to do or how you have to approach this to help them understand the value that you're talking about?
Definitely. I mean, I think, we can all agree that, I mean, digital grown up with the internet right by their side. I mean, they have a different way of doing now. Olds pull out a swipe, and it's amazing. It's quite amazing. So it's a completely different ball game. And what I'm finding is when I'm talking at universities and speaking in front of a younger crowd, they generally know what social media is and what the different channels are. But that doesn't mean they still know how to use it. They still know how to use it on a personal level, which is, here's my family, here's the types of food I eat on the weekend and all those fun things. But to still learn how to do it from a proper marketing and sales perspective, it still rings true even with the younger generation. And when I'm dealing with some of the folks that might be in sales and looking at the sales industry, it's obviously the average age is much older than you'd find in university. It's actually quite a bit older. What I'm looking at doing there is just really helping them understand that these social media channels are not any different than all the things you've used in the past. And in fact, they're not even different from back in the old days before our time when people had tribes and they sent a messenger to go tell a message to another tribe. It's the same thing. We've just progressed through time. We've saw the advent of the telephone or the megaphone back in the day and a fax machine, and it's all just a new channel in which you can engage and interact with people. So just making sure in that aspect and in regard really helps people understand that it's not anything different. It's something I've done already. I still have to be social. I still have to act the same way. It's just a new way of engaging with people. And that's the biggest difference that I've found in dealing with digital millennials and some of the older folks that might be in the sales industry.
That's really important because you're making the point that, wow, it's stuff I already do. I already be social. I go to church. I go to PTA. I go to the store. I talk to people. I look and see what's in their cart. I say, oh, you like chocolate too, or you drink that kind of pop or whatever. And I make comments that are relevant to the situation and relevant to the moment. And I do it to create rapport so I can talk to somebody standing in line. And we all do that sort of thing. And what you're saying is, we've done this forever, and why don't you do it when you sell people stuff and stop thinking about it in terms of selling them something and start thinking about it in terms of getting to know them and seeing if you've got something that helps them. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
That's exactly it, and it's insane to see how people just change as soon as they go on social media. They figure that because it's just them in front of a computer screen rather than face-to-face with someone that they should behave differently. And it's actually not the case. It's, if you walked into a dinner party, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to ask what you like, what other people are into, what their interests are, what they do, and show interest to somebody else. And then that person's going to decide whether or not you're adding value to the conversation. So after you know each other and build rapport, can you add value to them? And if you can't, they'll probably move on and talk to somebody else at the dinner party. And that's no different than social media. So consistently being interested in other people and adding value to every conversation you're in is something that is exactly the same as it would be in a dinner party. And oftentimes, even though it sounds such an easy approach and such an easy way to move something you've already done in the past to something that you're currently doing today, I sometimes have to come up with little ways to help people along with that. So one of those ways is telling people about the 411 content strategy. So if you're going to go on social and you're going to share messages on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and etc., if you follow a 411 strategy, you're bound to make sure that you're consistently adding value. And what I mean by that is every 6 pieces of content that you share, 4 of those should have nothing to do with you or your company. They should be industry-related news, and it should add value. So not that it should ever represent a competitor in a good light, but it needs to just show information, valuable information around the industry. Now, out of every 6, if you're sharing 4 of those bits of information that follow that, then one piece of information should be a link to your blog post or your company's blog post. And last but not least, there should be one link to a landing page or some link that you're going to point somebody to, such as the demo or the Buy Me Now page that actually is a call to action to actually create a purchase. And if you follow that formula day in and day out, you're going to be seen as somebody who doesn't oversell on social media, who adds value, and is able to converse with people around popular and current topics. So by following the 411 formula, it's an easy way for people to really get in the regimen of not talking about themselves too much and being social online.
Wow, that's great. So we're going to talk some more about implementation stuff in a minute. For those of you that joined late, let me repeat a couple things that I said earlier. If you haven't already gone to Julio's page, here's what you need to do. www, this is in your browser bar right now, www.resultswithkellen.com/Julio, Julio. You'll know you're on the right page when you see the photo of our guest, Julio Viskovich. My friends, Julio has a free gift, especially for you, for a thank you for listening to us here today. Now, Julio, your free thank you gift is called, it's got a great name, Taming the Social Selling Beast, and I love it. In just a few sentences, could you tell me, or describe for our listeners, actually, what they're going to get in Taming the Social Selling Beast thank you gift?
Absolutely. And I put this together for our listeners today because one of the questions I get on and on and on is, how do I maximize social selling? How come I can easily get lost in this sea or this pool of endless social information, and I end up wasting 2 or 3 hours of my day and not getting any results out of it? So this video that I put together for our audience is specifically around how to manage your time properly and get the maximum efficiency and impact out of your social media activities. So I'm going to show you how in 30 minutes per day, you can leverage the right tools and take the right approach to maximize your time using social media and drive revenue and not interfere with your other activities that you still need to do from a traditional standpoint.
That's fantastic, because I certainly know that that is a bugaboo for me, where I spend sometimes too much time on social media. And the thing you just mentioned as well, 4 pieces of regular content just about topics, and then one maybe with a link and another to it with a call to action, link to a blog or a call to action. That's a good number, and 411, of course, is something we all know, and member for information and so forth. So that's really great, and that special gift sounds really good, because it's certainly a problem I have struggled with. Now, friends, I'll tell you in a minute how to get that special gift. I want to call your attention to another piece right now, and that is the Julio Viskovich special offer, just for listening to this interview as well. So I'll tell you in a minute how to get the free gift, but right now I want you to go to the big orange button called special offer. It's big, it's orange, and you cannot miss it. Click on that button right now. Okay, now what you'll find is you'll know you're on the right page when you see Julio Viskovich's Effective Social Selling Strategies. I had to get the name just right. So on this page, you'll be able to read all about the exclusive special offer that Julio has put together just for listeners of our program today. Julio, your package is called Julio Viskovich's Effective Social Selling Strategies. In just a few sentences, could you also describe a little bit about what your special offer is, what's in that package that you and your team have put together for our listeners today?
Absolutely. So what it is it's a 6-course on-demand learning and training video series. And what it does is it focuses on the major key social networks like Facebook, Google+, Twitter, LinkedIn, Hootsuite, and as well as an examination of other social selling tools that are going to make you a social selling rock star. So by taking this course into account and going through the paces, and of course it includes workbooks and access to me on a coaching level, you're going to really learn how to maximize social selling on your, throughout your day-to-day activities. And that's what I really want to do here today, is make sure everybody leaves this with a great idea of what they're going to do and a personal action plan that they can put into play to start making more dollars.
Wow, that's a mouthful, and it's a lot of stuff, because I know that lots of people that I talk to struggle with both how much time, how to get started, and how to do the most with social media. Friends, if you'd like to take Julio up on his special offer at this exclusive, enormous discount, scroll to the top of the screen and click on the Add to Cart button. The rest is easy. Just fill out the form and click the Submit Order button, and do that now. And remember, in a moment, I'll be telling you how to get a hold of Julio's free thank you gift. So I've got more questions. You talked before, I asked you about people starting a business, and you said they've got to change things from the ground up. And I know that, and I would agree with you completely, and you've given a whole list of reasons why that's important. So what are the most important things to think about for a new startup to use what you teach? What are the like 2 or 3 most important things for somebody to think about if I'm a new startup to implement what you teach?
Mm-hmm. So from a new startup perspective, you're looking at getting to the right people who already have a network. So if I'm going to say what is the number one thing, or number one and two thing for that matter, from a startup to really experience some good growth at the beginning, right? It's to go out and connect with influencers in your space. There's a number of tools out there, but just using a Clout score, for example, and Clout is a score of 1 to 100 that measures someone's influence online, is identifying who are those key influencers in your space and having a reach out strategy to start connecting with them, because they've already built major audiences, they've already built trust. So if you're going to want to jump in the deep end and make an impact that's immediate, you need to start connecting with the biggest influencers in your space, making sure they're on board. You can do this by just simple engagement, retweeting, favoriting their tweets, engaging with them on LinkedIn groups, Facebook, if that's something that you can do, and really start to establish a relationship with these folks. And when the time is right, you can ask for something from. So making sure you're leveraging the influencers in your space is a fantastic way to accelerate your trust and credibility and access a network that you would spend perhaps years building yourself. So that's definitely one piece for new startups.
Yeah, that's absolutely great advice. And it's interesting because this whole social platform has given you the opportunity to do that. I mean, think about it. Let's say I'm in Phoenix and there's someone who is in Chicago, or let's say even you, they're in Vancouver, and I want to connect with you because you're a big influencer. Before, getting your phone number and trying to talk to you, that would have been crazy. But now with social access, I can find out what you're doing, I can look at your tweets, I can do what you just told me to do, retweet, share, engage, like, favorite, pass on, make a big deal out of you and so forth, and pretty soon you're going to notice me, and then when I reach out to say hello, you're going to say, hey, this guy's been saying good things about me, who is he? And so that's going to be kind of an easy way to get to know him rather than flying up to Vancouver and trying to run into you in the grocery store or something. So that drives me to my next question, which is just perfect here. There are so many social platforms these days. You've mentioned 3 or 4 of them. You've mentioned Facebook, you've mentioned Twitter, you've mentioned LinkedIn, and you've mentioned G+. So those are 4 of the big ones. A question that I get all the time, and I don't even know if I know the right answer. So is it important to use every one of the social networks, or should you just pick 3 or 4 of them and start there and see, get in deeper on those?
It's absolutely not important at all to be on every single social network. In fact, that's something that I highly recommend against, because that's when you're going to find social media becoming a time suck, and that's where you're going to find your activities on certain networks that are inefficient. So you need to figure out where the majority of your buyers are, your target audience is, and sink your time into that. And I generally recommend by starting out, 1 to 2 to maximum 3 social networks if you're just an individual. So for example, an exercise I love to do is tell me about your customer. Who are they? What are their demographics? And when I know the demographics, I can map that backwards and understand what social networks they're on. So for example, if your target market is 20 to 35-year-old women who are enjoying fitness, yoga, that type of thing, then you totally do not want to be on Google+. That's skewed towards older gentlemen who are in the technology space, who are currently sharing news, which is kind of the majority of the base on Google+ right now. So understanding your buyer and customer is first the ideal scenario, mapping it back with their demographics and understanding what networks they match up with. Those are the networks you want to start on. So for anybody in the B2B space, I mean, obviously LinkedIn is key. Twitter is probably going to be key as well, but for B2C players, you may want to be on Facebook first. So it's all going to be dependent on who your audience is and where they currently are online, and mastering those networks and not worrying about the others.
Great advice again. Thank you. That's really, really good, and a good solid answer with reasoning. So I had a client, in fact, I've had more than one, that has expressed a fear of a loss of privacy by showing much up on social media. Like somehow they're going to be exposed in a way they don't want to, and maybe it's groundless or whatever. But have you heard people say that, and what would you say to someone that has some kind of worry about that?
I've heard that many, many times, and like it or not, we are in a completely different world where, whether you think you have privacy or not, your data is already out there. People already have access to tons of your information, and yeah, people are going through that, constantly as they're moving from a period in their life where they had a lot of privacy to now jumping into the online world where everything's out there for you. People are seeing what you're doing. They're seeing what you're up to at night, and this can be dangerous. And I understand that as well. I mean, people who are checking in on Foursquare or telling people they're on vacation on Facebook are inviting perhaps even crimes to happen, or their house being robbed, right? But those are not the way that I'm suggesting that you use social media. You go on there, and if you're going to be dealing with people, prospects, other folks that are potential customers, you have to understand that they need to know about you. I mean, you need to build relationships, and this is how you can build trust online, is you have to open up a little bit and give some of yourself away. Now, that being said, don't go overboard. My general rule is if you can't tell this sentence to your mother or this particular piece to your mother, then don't put it on social media. And if you follow those rules, you can be rest assured that any information you put out there is going to be okay. So don't worry about it. It's all good.
So the mom test. You tell everybody their info's got to pass the mom test.
That's it.
Okay, that's cool. The mom test. Can you tell your mom? If you can tell your mom that, you're probably good on that. So I like that because I've said kind of the same things, and I'm not quite as diplomatic as you. When someone asks me that, my first answer is get over it. So anyway, you're a little bit more diplomatic than I am. But the point is, it's out there already, and you need to do it. So let's talk a little bit more about that new openness on social media, and let's even assume that it passes the mom test. So let's set all those things that wouldn't pass the mom test out of the picture. But there's still a new level of openness and disclosure. And you said something just now that I thought was really interesting. You said people want to know you. And I found that too, and I'm finding that to be a feature that is growing more and more. So talk about that. Our private lives are a little bit more exposed, even if it passes the mom test. Mm-hmm. And can we use that, and how do we use that to our advantage as businesses, not in an unfair way, but in a good way to provide real value?
Fantastic question. So, I mean, when I do business, I want to do business with people who are like me, people who I identify with. So if I find out who I identify with and who are like me, I go to their social channels and I look at what they're doing. And if I don't identify with someone, or if I don't find any information about them that I can even use as a comparison to see if I would like to do business with them, then that's a problem. I'm going to skip over you and go to the next guy, because I don't have the time to do too much digging. You should be readily telling me, stuff about yourself. And that's what I need, and that's what your LinkedIn profile should be. It should be a welcome to my home. This is my LinkedIn profile. Here's what you need to know about me, and I would love to do business with you. And if you're not putting out that vibe online, you're going to be missing out, because that's what's happening in today's business world. It's moved online, and you have to be prepared for those interactions, and you have to be building your social profiles for those interactions. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I've used that information successfully. So about 2 years ago, and this is when I really started to hone in my methodology around social selling, is I was working with a rep at Hootsuite, and we were trying to get a hold of somebody. And this was a 2 to 3 month process where no phone calls were returned, no emails were returned, and we were using all of these multi-$100,000 training techniques to be able to write emails and make phone calls, and nobody cared. Everybody else is doing it. So what we did was we went on Twitter, we found this person, and by just looking at their profile, we found out that they love dogs, they like the Green Bay Packers, and a number of other things. So what we did is we stepped away from the traditional reach-out method of, hey, do you need more leads in your email subject line? And we tried, how about them Green Bay Packers? Now, we were using an email tracking or opening tracking program called Yesware at the time, and it immediately told us that unlike out of all of the other emails that we sent over that 2 or 3 month period, this one was opened within 10 minutes. And within 10 minutes from that point, we had received an email reach out back saying we would be happy to have a chat with you. Now, all it was personalizing the subject line around some things that they liked, and personalizing the first line of the email saying, we're excited to watch the Packers game this weekend, but I would love to actually talk to you about what you're doing in the social media space. Caused an instantaneous response from them because we took the time to pull a piece of that information out that they readily gave online. And we used that to help personalize our reach out. And it immediately built a rapport and gave context to our conversation and made the sales process a much more pleasant situation for both sides.
That's a fantastic example of both the effectiveness and of how simple it was. I mean, it didn't take you 3 weeks or 3 hours to figure out what they needed to hear. And that was funny when you said that. I thought you were going to tell me you went and got a dog and put a Green Bay Packers jersey on it and took a picture or something. But anyway, what you did was effective, and it was perfect. So one of the things you talked about letting people get to know you and putting those signals out there, come and do business with me, come and know me. I'm not hidden. I'm open. When I go to conferences, I hear so much these days about the use of personal story, and it goes right along the lines of being inviting and how to use, how to be open. So how does social media play into that push that I keep hearing talked about your personal story?
Mm-hmm. Well, it just gives transparency to your personal story, right? I mean, for someone to know anything about me going back 5 or 6 years, like you mentioned earlier, they would have had to just cold called me up and hope that I would have, taken enough time out of my day to give to them. And then perhaps we might have eventually been able to build a rapport through a series of questions, etc. Imagine this, right? Social media, by understanding and seeing the transparency that's out there and being able to see something or key elements about somebody or some person, if you didn't have that, right? If you didn't know anything about them or had any social interactions over Twitter or LinkedIn, you're starting from the ground up. It's, hi, I'm Julio. Do you know anybody I know? What school did you go to? This is all stuff that's common knowledge now. It's on LinkedIn. It's on Twitter. You should know that already. And now when you step into a meeting or conversation with someone, because of the transparency that social media has provided, we can now immediately accelerate our conversation and start getting into heavier business conversations quicker rather than spending that initial 10 minutes getting to know how many brothers and sisters you have or where you grew up or what school you were in. We should have that information already, and a good salesperson knows it's out there online, and as a buyer, if it is out there online and you haven't found it, you have not done enough work to win me over.
Again, some really, really good advice that I'm taking some notes too here, just because I love what you're saying. So, my friends, if you have not been to Julio's special offer page, let me give you that link again, and you need to go there now. That's www.resultswithkellen.com/Julio, Julio. On that page, look for the big orange special offer button and click on that special offer button. On that special offer page, you can read all about the exclusive special offer Julio has put together for us. There's modules on 4 of the big social media, G+, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Also, Hootsuite is sort of a manager of your social media interaction. And then another module, too, on some implementation and other social media. And the coolest part is what he mentioned in describing it, some access to him. And remember when he talked about that, this access to actually having him walk you through some of these things. And that's what you get also as part of this special offer. So go ahead, take a look there at that special offer and take advantage of it now. Click on that Add to Cart button, and the rest is easy. Just fill out the form and click the Submit Order button. So now I've got some questions that have come in from listeners as we've been doing this, and they're interesting because they are important questions, but they're predictable because I've heard them and I know you have too, and so I'm sure they'll be good for you to answer. So here's one. I mean, it says, isn't it really too late? Isn't this avenue already maxed out in terms of people trying to do this?
Yeah, believe it or not, it's not. We're at the actual beginning of the life cycle of this, where it hasn't hit mainstream adoption, at least proper adoption. Yes, there's probably millions of people trying to do this, but people who are actually executing on it and having success is an extremely small number. And what I can share with you, and what I've done today, and obviously in my course as well, is what elements are actually driving the efficiency and success. And people are doing it wrong. There's a number of elements that you need to focus on to maximize what you're doing online, maximize every relationship and conversation you have online. And when you start to do those things, that's when you start to join that top 10% who are finding success, still managing their day-to-day traditional activities, but using social media as a layer over top to make those traditional activities much more successful. So, you know, I could say it one way or another. Social media is still a blue ocean, and there's still lots of room for people to do it properly.
I love the blue ocean, and you know, it's important because, yeah, there's 1 billion, 2 billion people on all the social media platforms, but as you point out, so many people are not getting it. It's still, I mean, the fact that you hear that it's such a time suck and a waste of time and people aren't finding it effective is ample evidence that it's not being done in a powerful or productive way yet. So there's tons of open opportunity, and I love the term blue ocean, so that's great. So here's another one. Can I do this by myself, or do I have to hire an army to help?
Well, you could hire the Canadian Army. We have only about 5 members, so that's pretty, might be worth it. But no, I do this by myself. And one of the ways that social media is so impactful is exactly that. It allows small companies or individuals the ability to take a bite out of the big guys. Big marketing budgets don't matter anymore. It's about person to person, human to human. No more B2B, no more B2C. It's about H to H, human to human. And an army can't help there. It's all about you and doing it by yourself. And that's what I like to empower, is people going out as individuals and representing themselves as a trusted individual who's ready to add value. And if you can do that, I promise you that you will not need an army for that. And it's easily done by, you know, one person if you can take a right approach and make sure that you're maximizing your efficiency each and every day.
So that's a really good thing to write down. B2B is, you know, big marketing budget doesn't matter. What it really comes down is this human-to-human interaction. So here's a question that I have about demographic. You noted earlier that there's lots of sales folks that are older, and then there's the digital millennials that grew up with this stuff. I was just talking to one the other day. So the next question makes a lot of sense in that context. Is it easier for younger people to do this than older folks?
It's not necessarily easier, but there's less of a barrier to overcome off the get-go, because you know, some of the older folk that I've dealt with in the past, or at least salespeople versus digital millennials, and going back to my point earlier, is they just don't get that it's just such an easy approach. They just don't get that they just need to be themselves, and they're a little bit nervous and scared to try a new avenue when over the last 20 to 30 years they've been using a Rolodex. They've been using the phone that's beside them to call whoever they need to call as soon as they have a new lead come in. It's just understanding that, you know, I'm not trying to make you change the way you've been living or doing business. Do those things. However, now I'm going to augment those with some really amazing data, information, and connection to some of the folks that you might be seeing as prospects. So once they realize that, hey, it's not any different than the stuff that I've been, it's actually just a minor change, the adoption picks up pretty quickly among salespeople as well. So it not necessarily, but is it a little bit of a barrier to just first overcome, just like the day-to-day? Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, you know, it's really interesting. You've said another thing or two that I want to make sure that I write down, and friends, I hope you write it down too. He'd said, be yourself, and it's human to human. And you know, it's funny because we do that in our daily lives when we're not thinking about that, oh, I'm trying to sell something thing. We're just being ourselves, and we're acting human to human, and we do that in the course of our relationships. And it's really a relief and a pleasure that the process of adding value, you said, you know, be yourself and add value. Be yourself and add value. Human to human, add value. Hey, what could be easier than that? All right, well, a couple other questions here. I hear this from a lot of people, this comment, and it's come in here again. My situation is so different, nothing really is going to work for me. So what would you say to that comment?
Well, I mean, I'd certainly like to dig in and get some specifics, but everyone has their unique approach. And yeah, maybe a generic, approach to social selling might not be the route to take. However, there's always a way to leverage social. Even if it's unlike any of the situations I've talked to today, there's always a way to use it, right? I mean, typically, the way we sell is you have an initial contact with somebody, and then you go into a dark period, and then you have another contact, and then a dark period, and then another contact. Well, social actually allows you to release and remove that dark period from happening, and actually allows you to touch base with your buyers in between those dark periods that were traditionally there, so that you understand what's going on, your relationship is strong with them. There's different ways of using social. So if it's outside of the realm and one of the areas we talked about today, reach out to me. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to figure out a way that's going to allow you to adopt social selling.
One of the things that you said, that's a great answer, and one of the things that you said, two things that I'm writing down I think are really important. One is the acceleration process. You said that earlier, and it sounds like the same thing here. That dark period before where you're wondering if they're going to have another contact, and the fact that you get to know them and you can also maintain contact, that acceleration of the business conversation can happen in such a natural and easy way. And if the whole thing has come from the context of service rather than the context of selling, then maintaining that contact is a natural thing, and it doesn't feel pushy because you're actually seen as the trusted advisor that you talked about earlier. And that's such an important distinction with what social selling has done. Well, Julio, you've given a lot of great value today and a lot of really good insight into the changes that have happened and into the new world, basically, of selling. Now, I'm going to tell you now, friends, how to get your free thank you gift. You need to be on your the audience dashboard webpage. That's the first one that you are at. That's www.resultswithkellen.com/Julio. And to get your thank you gift, it's on the special offer page. So you got to click that big orange button to get to the special offer page, and then scroll all the way down and find the box with the red dotted lines around it. And that heading is Julio Viskovich's thank you gift. Now fill in your name and email address, and then click on the send button. And within moments, we'll automatically send you your link to Julio's thank you gift. For you that joined this interview late and may have missed some of the fantastic content that we had, you don't need to worry about it. We'll be posting the replay, and it'll be up for 72 hours after this. And if you want to share this free 72-hour replay, absolutely, I want you to do that. Send those that you think might be interested to www.resultswithkellen.com. And if you haven't already done so, now is absolutely the right time to take advantage of Julio Viskovich's Effective Social Selling Strategies package, because you need to do this. It is a fantastic offer offered at an exclusive, enormous discount today just for listening to this broadcast. So go to the special offer page, click on the Add to Cart button now. The rest is easy. Just fill out the form and click the Submit Order button. Friends, thank you for listening to this interview today. Julio, thank you for sharing your insights with us. I really appreciate you coming today. Bye for now, friends.